how every UFC fighter can win the title. Alex Pereira. Okay, Alex Pereira is fighting in less than a week, and honestly, I'm predicting Ankalaev to win. I think the only way Alex Pereira can win the title is if he wins this fight. I don't think there's any other possibility of him getting a rematch or going up to heavyweight and winning. He needs to win this fight, and the way he can win this fight is, honestly, I think the only way he can win is just landing that big hook. You know, drawing Ankalaev in, landing a left hook, hitting him with one big shot and putting him away. I don't see Alex Pereira winning a decision. But for Paddy Pimblett, I think the path for him to win the title is to wait a little bit. You know, a title shot against Ilia Topuria, it's really hype right now in the short term. But long term for Paddy Pimblett, that's probably one of the biggest mistakes he can make, because I don't care what anybody thinks, he's going to get flatlined against Topuria badly, probably in the first or second round. And that's really going to hurt his career. You know, if he just takes some time and fights less frequently and trains a lot, fights a lot of these contenders and actually gets better, that's the way for him to get to the title, I think. You know, waiting for Topuria to move on, because listen, like Topuria, I don't think there's a world where Paddy Pimblett beats Topuria. I think there's a world where, you know, Paddy Pimblett can beat Arman Tsarukyan though. And if Topuria moves up or Topuria retires and Islam Makhachev's, you know, up a weight class or retires, I think Paddy Pimblett can go in there and win the title. But currently right now, even fights against Holloway, Arman Tsarukyan, even Charles Oliveira, it's hard to pick him to win any of those, let alone the title. So I think what he needs the most is to wait and let things blow over. Now for Islam Makhachev, going into this fight with JDM, I think what he needs to do to win the title is to grapple like his life depends on it. Because listen, he's not going to beat JDM on the feet. I hope everybody knows that. He's not going to win in the boxing. The kickboxing, Islam's good. He's not going to beat JDM in the kickboxing. JDM has range, JDM has size, JDM's more skilled on the feet. What he needs to do, and what he's better than JDM at, is wrestling, jiu-jitsu, grappling in general. He needs to implement that. He needs to get trips and throws. He needs to clinch him up against the cage. And he needs to chase submissions, because that's one way I think he can finish JDM early, is if he gets a submission. You know, I can see him catching JDM in the middle of a scramble with a Darce or something like that. But even him, you know, winning over a decision through grappling, it's even hard to see that, the way we've seen Islam Makhachev gas out against guys like Poirier. Now he's fighting a guy like JDM. It's going to be really difficult. And I think what he needs to do is be super aggressive, chase submissions, and go for a takedown right away. Now for Arman Tsarukyan, what he needs to do isn't anything about his actual fight game itself. He needs to step in the ring and actually fight somebody, because for some reason, I don't know why he's so delusional, but he thinks that he can sit out and get a title shot after ruining an entire event earlier in the year. Now, if I was the UFC, I would do it differently. I would still book Arman Tsarukyan for a title shot just because, you know, he's the number one contender, but the UFC is not going to do that. They're not going to book him against Topuria after what he did with the Islam Makhachev matchup, pulling out of a fight where the doctors cleared him to fight last second. I don't care how many stupid fucking grappling matches he does that nobody watches. He's not going to get a title shot from that. And he's for damn sure not getting a title shot making Instagram reels. So what he needs to do to become champion is at the very least get in there and fight a contender, so he even gets the opportunity to fight a guy like Ilia Topuria or whoever's champion at the time. Now for Max Holloway, I'm going to be honest, I don't think there's anything he can do to become champion. For as long as Ilia Topuria is champion, I don't see him winning. Even Arman Tsarukyan, if Arman Tsarukyan comes in, I don't see a way where he could become champion. At least for Paddy Pimblett, you know, maybe he can just wait a little bit. He's a little younger than the rest of the guys. He can get better. He has time to grow. Holloway's, you know, getting older. I don't think there's much improvements to be made for him, as opposed to a guy like Paddy Pimblett. So I think waiting isn't really going to do much for Holloway. And a matchup with Ilia Topuria, it's just impossible to predict him to win. Now for Ciryl Gane, genuinely the only way I think he can win the title is if he like catches Tom Aspinall coming in with his chin up in the air, catches a 1-2 and shocks the world. The chances of that happening are probably like 1 in a million, but that's the only way I can ever see Ciryl Gane becoming champion again. And that's if Aspinall doesn't take him down from the moment the bell rings. Now for Jiri Prochazka, I think the way for him to win the title is obviously to beat Roundtree and to fight the way he did against Jamal Hill. still with his same style, but a little bit more defensively sound. Against a guy like Ankalaev, he needs to be on point with his defense. He can't walk around with his chin up in the air too much because Ankalaev's precise. He has power. I think Ankalaev is going to be a huge test for Jiri, even more so than probably Pereira. And maybe the matchup favors Jiri. Maybe the unpredictability of Jiri can throw Ankalaev off. But I think what he needs to do is be more defensively sound, kind of fight like how he did against Jamal Hill. Now for Movsar Evloev, I think kind of like Arman Tsarukyan, he just needs to fight a contender because at this point, even though he's deserving to fight Volk, I think that's the fight to make. The UFC for some reason doesn't want to do it. And I think one way to make him undeniable is to fight somebody like Diego Lopez in a rematch. That will 100% make him, undeniable to fight for the title. But right now, it doesn't seem like the UFC is going to book him against Volk. Now, for Cory Sandhagen, again, I think he genuinely has no chance against Merab. I don't think there's a way this guy can win the title. Unless Merab retires, Sean O'Malley retires, Umar Nurmagomedov retires, Petr Yan retires, pretty much half the contenders in bantamweight retires. I don't think there's a chance he wins the title. I think this title shot for Sandhagen against Merab, the only reason it's acceptable is because it's a fresh new face. Other than that, skill-wise, I think he has no chance. He doesn't have that X factor. A guy like, O'Malley has that. There's a possibility he knocks out Merab. Sandhagen has absolutely no chance. He's not powerful. He's not better in the grappling. He doesn't have better cardio. He has nothing. I think he's pretty much hopeless to win the title. Now for Sean O'Malley, I think what he needs to do to win the title, really the only possible way he can even have a chance is if he trains wrestling for years, genuinely like years, and he bulks up somehow and still can fit in the bantamweight division, because what we've seen is just he is completely outclassed on the ground by Merab. Not strong enough, not technical enough. I mean, he got done so easily in their second fight. What he needs to do is just train his ass off in wrestling, and maybe he has a chance. Now for Umar, I think it's similar to Paddy Pimblett. I think he just needs to wait a little bit. What Umar has even more so than Paddy Pimblett is time on his side. He's not even 30 yet, I think. And a guy like Merab who's 36, if he waits a little bit, he gets a little bit better. I would predict him to win against Merab in a year from now. For Petr Yan, though, I think there's absolutely nothing he can do. The way he lost to Merab, the thing with Petr Yan is he has the skill, he just doesn't have the size. And for Merab, who's pretty much what makes him so good is his physicality, it's going to be a huge problem. That's why I'm not a big proponent of seeing Petr Yan get a rematch title fight against Merab, no matter how many wins he gets, is because I just don't think there's a way he can win that. Now for Charles Oliveira, I think the only thing he can rely on is if Ilia Topuria moves up. There's a chance he beats Arman Tsarukyan in a fight. I mean, the first fight he arguably won. There's a chance he could beat, Max Holloway. There's a chance he can take him down and submit him. But as long as Ilia Topuria is champion or Islam Makhachev comes down, there's really no chance for him. Now for Justin Gaethje, almost as much as Sandhagen, there's absolutely no chance. He's not beating Topuria. He's not beating Oliveira. He's not beating Islam. He's not beating Arman Tsarukyan. He's not beating Holloway. And I don't think he's even beating Paddy Pimblett. So for him, I think he just honestly needs to retire or, just be happy being a contender. And for Dricus du Plessis, I think the way for him to become champion again is hope Khamzat moves up or moves down or something, because with a lot of these guys where there's really good champions, there's just no chance for them to win. Like, for Dricus to win, I just don't think it's possible. Like, he would have to he's so much worse in the grappling that, I really just don't think there's a possibility for him to ever challenge Khamzat Chimaev or become champion as long as he's in the division. Now for Imavov, who's probably the next guy in line to fight Khamzat Chimaev, what he needs to do and what every contender needs to do is to stay on the feet, which is a lot easier said than done. If anybody can do it, I think probably Imavov can. Out of anybody in the division, maybe Hernandez has more of a chance, but Imavov on the feet would piece up Khamzat, that's for sure. But that's the thing, can he stay on the feet? I don't think so, but that's what he needs to do to win the title. Now for Strickland, there's another one of these guys who has no chance. I don't care if it's Khamzat who's champion, Dricus who's champion, especially the way he's been looking. It's looking like he's getting worse and worse. So yeah, I think he has no chance of becoming champion. And same thing with Adesanya. I don't think there's a chance in hell he becomes champion again. It doesn't matter who's champion. He lost to Imavov badly. He got finished by Dricus. He got dropped by Strickland. let alone Khamzat Chimaev. I don't think there's a chance he becomes champion at middleweight. Now for Shavkat Rakhmonov, I think what he needs to do to become champion is get a number one contenders fight a guy like Sean Brady, fight a guy like Usman, one of these top contenders, and hope that Islam Makhachev beats JDM, because I think against Islam Makhachev, Shavkat Rakhmonov has much more of a chance than against a guy like JDM. I think JDM would be able to stay in the feet against a guy like Shavkat, and on the feet, I think JDM would piece Shavkat up. Shavkat Rakhmonov has the head movement of like a rock'em sock'em. That's what he looks like when he's out there. When he's fighting guys like Ian Garry and, you know, Wonder Boy, Jeff Neal, he was just getting his ass pieced up. He doesn't move his head. He has great durability and power, so, you know, he doesn't need it as much as some other fighters. But with a guy like Makhachev, who I think Shavkat would beat on the feet, he has too much power, he's too rangy, and on the ground, I think he might be strong enough to hold off Islam. I think he has actually a pretty good chance of becoming champion if Islam Makhachev beats JDM. Now for Carlos Prates, the way for him to become champion, it's a little bit harder because he lost to Ian Garry, but he has a matchup with Leon Edwards, and if he knocks out Leon Edwards, especially if it's a crazy knockout like his last one, he's going to jump the line and get a title shot. I don't care if it's Shavkat Rakhmonov, anybody, he's going to jump the line against all those guys because it's clear the UFC wants this guy in big fights. And in terms of a title fight, I think he has a little bit better chance against Islam Makhachev if he becomes champion. I think the striking is really dangerous for Makhachev. There's a chance, I think, if Prates is super aggressive and tries to get a finish early in the fight, he has a somewhat decent chance of winning. Obviously, it's the same way for Islam Makhachev. I think if Makhachev gets Prates down, it's game over, but that's why that fight would be really entertaining. Now for Leon Edwards, at this point in his career, I don't think there's any chance for him, you know, to become champion. And, you know, in the Prates fight, I think there's a chance he actually beats Prates. But even if he beats Prates, I can't see him beating a guy like JDM or Islam Makhachev at all. Like a guy like Makhachev, I think would tear Leon Edwards apart. So I really don't see a way for him to win the title. Now for Ian Garry, I think he's one of these guys that need to wait out a little bit. He's actually really young. He's like 26 years old. If he gets a little bit better and some of these guys get a little bit older, he's going to have a huge chance. I think he's one of these guys that inevitably will be a champion, or at least will get a title shot. Now for Kamaru Usman, I think the only chance he has at becoming champion is if Islam Makhachev wins and for some reason they make that fight. But even going into a fight with Islam Makhachev, it's hard to predict Usman to win, especially this late in his career. I don't think he would win in the ground. I think they would end up on the feet for the entire fight, and I think Islam Makhachev beats Usman on the feet, especially what we saw against Joaquin Buckley. Usman looked horrible on the feet. Makhachev has really solid kickboxing. I think for Usman to win, he would have to catch Makhachev or something. Now for Sean Brady, I think what he needs, same thing with Ian Garry, is just some time. I don't think he beats JDM. I don't think he really beats Islam either. I think if he works on his striking a little bit, he becomes more well-rounded, he'll have a somewhat decent chance of becoming champion. And finally for Belal Muhammad, I don't think there's anything he can do. We saw with JDM, he just got outclassed completely. I think Makhachev would be able to, you know, keep Belal on the feet, outstrike him, or even get a choke against Belal. And especially at the age Belal's at right now, I just don't think there's a chance he ever becomes champion again.